Welcome back to the Tech Talks daily podcast, where every day we explore the fascinating intersection of technology and society. I'm your host, Neil C. Hughes, and today we're diving into a topic that's gained significant attention in recent times: workplace surveillance tools and their impact on employee privacy. Because in an age where data privacy is a paramount concern, I think it's crucial for organisations to tread carefully when it comes to monitoring their workforce. It is a huge topic right now. And the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, they recently revealed some alarming insights about the public's concerns regarding worker privacy and the risks associated with surveillance tools. So to shed light on this important issue, today I'm going to be inviting Ian van Reenen, CTO of a company called 1E, onto the podcast. They're a leading tech company, and we're going to discuss the do's and don'ts of surveillance tools, draw from his extensive experience and insights, and also dive into why a substantial portion of IT workers and managers are viewing these tools as a potential invasion of privacy. So as organisations seek to boost productivity, I think it's crucial to strike a balance between efficiency and respecting employee privacy, and Ian will provide valuable perspectives on this increasingly delicate matter. But enough from me. Let's get Ian on the podcast now. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Hello, Neil. Yes, thanks for having me on the show. My name is Ian van Reenen. I'm the CTO for a company called 1E. And we operate in the DEX market. That's a digital employee experience market. And people often find it confusing because it's a relatively new term in the industry. But the way I describe it is an evolution of end-user compute. So what we do is allow organizations to measure the success of their internal IT programs in terms of end-user satisfaction. In other words, is IT enabling our users to be the most productive versions of themselves? I think that probably sums it up in a nutshell.
Well, it's a huge pleasure to have you on the podcast with me today. There's so much I want to talk with you about today. For example, I think there is an increased scrutiny around things like data privacy, and it seems to be changing the landscape for workplace surveillance tools, especially in IT environments. Can you expand on what you're seeing around this right now?
Sure. I think it's been accelerated by the upsurge in hybrid working since the pandemic, and people have continued to work from home, as we all know, and it's now a mixture of working from home and working from the office or working from the coffee shop. And the key element there is that it's hybrid and that you could be working from absolutely anywhere. So for companies, the concern arose that are users doing what they should be doing? Are we getting through what we need to get through as an organization to achieve our goals? And one of the, I guess, obvious ways of doing this, although it's perhaps a reflection on human nature, say, well, let's check. Let's measure and surveil what our users are doing to ensure that they're actually getting through the work that they need to do. So there have been IT tools developed for many years now, but deployed into organizations to do exactly that, to check up on what users are doing. And it's not the sort of obvious things, well, we're recording you with the camera or the microphone, or we're checking keystrokes or things like that. It's simple things like, how busy is your calendar? How many calls are you taking? How much are you interacting with the IT that we provide for you? Are you logged on, and what time do you log on? So there's certainly been an upsurge in organizations looking for this sort of information, because they're concerned that in this new hybrid working world, that without having everybody in the office, that people aren't necessarily doing what they should be doing. That's been an area that we've wanted to understand a little bit more about, because being in the space that we are and understanding end user experience, having end users being uncomfortable with either what they're doing or with the fact that somebody may be watching what they're doing is a key part of that experience.
And I've wrote in the past quite a few times around surveillance technology in the workplace. And one of the things that put you on my radar was, I think it was the 1E survey, which showed that I think it was 87% of IT managers were observing a a negative impact from using surveillance technology. So can you expand on some of the negative impacts that we're talking about here?
Yeah, sure. So that's 87% of IT managers who have used that technology really felt that it wasn't achieving what they needed it to achieve, and that it in fact made them feel quite uncomfortable in rolling it out. And there are a couple of different aspects to that. One is, for many years now, IT has faced an uphill battle in many cases of trying to reposition themselves from being the people who roll out corporate policy and tell you how you need to use your laptop and what needs to be running and when how you need to look after it and when you need to install patches, etc. And really, what they've been trying to do is change that perception, change the way they operate to rather be the enabler of productivity for users. So let's understand what you're trying to achieve in your job, and let's provide you with the IT that can best assist you in achieving those goals. So when managers are asked to roll out surveillance technology, that immediately undermines that trust, and especially when it's not obvious to the users that it's been done, and they've been asked to do it sort of covertly. You can imagine that goes against that big initiative of IT trying to rebrand itself as being a user-centric organization. So that's one of the key things, is this erosion of trust for IT managers. The second area is that, and this is particularly when people are working from home or cafes, etc., is that you and I and every user out there isn't working all the time from 9 to 5. They take a lunch break, or a call comes in, or somebody pops their head in, or they have to deal with with a doctor's appointment or a child's an issue from one of their kids. And surveillance tools aren't necessarily sophisticated enough to be able to identify what is work and what is personal. So very often that falls to IT managers, and that's just not a job they're either trained to do or want to do. So again, just leads to this really uncomfortable position that they find themselves into, where they're having to make judgment calls on decisions that can affect people's lives.
And as companies around the world they strive to boost productivity, are there any alternative approaches that you would recommend that equally respect employee privacy while also providing valuable insights into that digital employee experience? Because it's quite a tricky balance, I would imagine.
Yeah, it is tricky, but it comes down to being clear about what it is that you're trying to achieve. So for an organization, regardless of where, how many staff they have or where they work or how often they interact with IT, the organization should be, if it's a good organization, should be very clear in terms of what it is they're trying to achieve as a business. What are the business goals? What are our short-term goals? What are our long-term goals? How do we want to position ourselves in the market? How do we want our customers to perceive us? What does that customer relationship look like? So all these things should be defined by a business, and great businesses do exactly that. They make that very clear as to what the sort of business they want to be and what their goals for any one particular period of time are. And if that is communicated internally out to their users, and in turn, each user has a very clear definition of what their particular role in achieving those company goals is, and how they can measure themselves by looking at being clear on what the definition of done is and what the definition of good is, then users are able to self-police themselves. They're able to say, well, here's what I want to achieve. Here's the role that the company needs me to play. So if I can put these targets in place, and these targets are transparent with the organization, with their managers, then users know where they're at in achieving those goals. And then regular reviews and training sessions and corrections and help and assistance from the business and the management team to enable users to achieve those goals is a far better way of operating and assisting users in achieving goals than covertly measuring them behind their backs.
So I'm curious, how do you respond to I think it was 73% of IT managers who expressed discomfort in deploying productivity surveillance technology due to a lack of transparency? Because again, a big stat, isn't it?
Yeah, huge stat. But it goes back to the issue of trust. I don't think any IT manager ever signed on to the job and thinking that part of their job was going to be to spy on the workforce, and that's what it is. We can position it how we like, but effectively, if you're not informing people that you're running surveillance software, then you're spying on your user force, and that puts people in a very difficult position. IT managers, like the rest of us, are all human. They all have colleagues and friends within businesses. They have their own career, their own managers, and their own staff. So they're constantly being asked to make their own sort of judgment calls as to where they can and with whom they can discuss these surveillance tools. And that just puts them in a position that they never sort of signed up to be in.
So if we zoom out a little here, how do you see workplace surveillance tools impacting things like talent acquisition and retention? Because your survey indicated quite an uptick in employees quitting and challenges around new hires too, right?
Yeah, I think exactly. We had about, from the responses, we had 30% of respondents saying they wouldn't take a job if they had any reason to believe that there were survey tools in place. And also 2 out of 5 people who were aware of surveillance tools listing that in the reasons to leave a particular job. So it definitely has a significant impact on employee churn. I think it comes down to, if an organization is relying on covert surveillance in order to understand and instrument the productivity of its staff, it hasn't done a good enough job, first of all, in outlining what a successful outcome looks like for that particular staff member, how they fit into the goals of the business, and finally, a performance review program that allows that empowers the user to participate in not only how they perform in those, but also in the review process themselves. So for me, it's a reflection of the business. I understand when businesses put these sort of tools in place because they're at a loss of how else to actually do it. It's a very easy thing to roll out. IT is IT. We can instrument anything on your laptop if we need to. So, the options are very, are very easy to put in place. It's a big part of the reason of why this DEX market has evolved as it has. And that it's just become so important that in order to retain users, in order to get the best possible version of every employee, but by removing friction from their IT experience and allowing them to do what they're good at, so allowing them to feel good about their job, you need to be able to instrument and understand friction in the IT space. So I guess friction has replaced or is in the process of replacing a perception of lack of productivity. We start saying, well, why isn't that user productive? What's holding them back? And if it's IT, can we detect that? Can we instrument it? And importantly, can we remediate it and remove it?
Looking towards the future in 2024 and beyond, how do you think organizations can better create a culture of trust and accountability without resorting to invasive surveillance tools? And just to bring to life everything that we're talking about here today, are there any examples where technology has been able to strike that balance effectively?
I think it's about user centricity.
Yeah.
I think it's about organizations reimagining the role that their users play. And for many organizations, they've always operated this way, and for many, they sort of pivoted to operate in this way, more recently. But it's, again, looking back at the goals of the organization and making it very clear to the employees of a company to what role they play in achieving those goals. So you can totally turn around the erosion of trust from where you're sort of surveying users to understand, how productive they are, to rather putting in positive performance programs that assist and review and improve end user productivity, and at the same time allow technology to do what it's really good at, and that is to understand where users are being held back. So understanding, I mentioned that friction, understand where friction exists in the organization. So is it taking a long time for users to log on? Are the security tools that we have in place frustrating users because they keep on coming up against dead ends when trying to achieve the outcomes of their specific role? Do they have the right tools in place in order to achieve that? Is the software that they have been provided with the right software, or does it just frustrate them? Do the communication tools that we provided for users, especially those working remotely, do they provide enough of a connection between users so that they feel part of a larger corporate goal? So it's all about user centricity. It's about turning around to say the company needs to achieve X, to turning around collectively, we as an organization need to achieve X. And your role in doing that is going to be this little bit here.
And on a more personal level, I think we're all at that time of the year where we're trying to prepare ourselves to be maybe better versions of ourselves in the new year by setting goals, learning more, etc. And there is a real pressure on every single person to be in a state of almost continuous learning now. So as we prepare for life in 2024, I've got to ask, where or how do you self-educate? How do you keep up to speed with the different trends and new technologies, etc.? Anything you can pass down to people listening?
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, the first thing is, and it's something I made a rule for myself many years ago, in that I ask the silly questions. Being in my role, and I've done this sort of work now for over 20 years, often you walk into a room and the expectation is you know all the answers in your particular space. And there are many times, in fact, I'd say most times, where there are far smarter people in the room than me. So I make sure that when I'm in a conversation with somebody that I do ask the questions and that I listen, because you learn so much from the people in the room with you. And that counts for customer conversations or networking at events, and events themselves. Okay, so events are another source of learning for me. I like to attend events, specifically, the Microsoft events like Ignite, extremely valuable in terms of what's happening in the industry, but also analyst events, the Gartner and Forrester events, particularly organizations that we work with, not only for the access to consolidated data and insights, but also to the networking, the opportunities at those. And then I guess finally for me, I really enjoy podcasts. I travel a fair bit, so whether it be on trains or planes or in the car, and I try and walk as much as possible as well. And during that time, I like to put on a podcast. And yes, quite often it's good to do with sort of my personal, hobbies, etc. But for a lot of the time, it's listening to things like, it changes, but I've been listening a lot to, Diary of a CEO, Stephen Bartlett at the moment.
Yeah.
There's been interesting guests on there. I listened to, a US tech podcast called This Week in Tech that I listen to a fair bit. But people will send me podcasts to listen to, and we share those amongst our team as well. We'll send out interesting podcasts. Although I do like to subscribe to a few, because if you listen to something, over a period of a few years as well, the message and the knowledge that you hear is within context of the broader framework of that particular podcast. Podcasts probably more than reading nowadays, which I'm not sure is a good thing, but it's certainly a popular thing.
Yeah, completely agree with you. I'm very similar with books as well, and thanks to things like Audible, I very often listen to a book rather than read a book, because I can listen during those busy periods where you're commuting or walking the dog, etc. But there is a side to me that doesn't like that and would sooner sit down and read a book. But it's difficult there's always something else vying for your time when you sit down or have a few minutes. But I know exactly what you mean by that. And for anybody listening wanting to dig a little bit deeper about anything that we talked about today, I mean, we did reference One East survey a few times. So if people want to find out about that or the work that you're doing or contact you or your team, where would you like to point everyone listening to that?
The easiest and best place to go is on our website. So there's contact information on there. There's There's a chat button there that could interact with our staff as well, and that is www.1e.com. That's the number 1 and the letter E.com. In fact, that comes just an interesting story to help people remember that. 1E are the last 2 characters in the Windows error code during a blue screen event. So when your laptop fails and you get that big messy blue screen and lots of numbers on it, at the end of the biggest number will be 1E. And that is exactly our mission in life. End those blue screen events, end those user frustration events.
Absolutely love that. The blue screen of death. Man, I don't want to see that again anytime soon. Love chatting with you today. I will post a link to the survey as well so people can find out more information about that. I do urge anyone listening to check you out and contact you or your team. There's so much great work that you're doing there. But more than anything, just thank you for taking the time to sit down and talk about some of those big topics at the moment around surveillance technology and that lack of transparency. But again, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Neil.
So a huge thank you to Ian, CTO of 1E, for shedding light on some of the complexities of workplace surveillance tools and their impact on both employees and organisations. And I think it's clear the rise of hybrid working models has amplified the need for vigilance and transparency when it comes to monitoring your employees. And privacy concerns should be addressed alongside productivity goals, and organisations are challenged with striking a balance that fosters trust and accountability. At the end of every podcast episode, I always ask you to email me questions, tips, advice, insights. And one of the most common questions I get is, Neil, you're a tech podcaster doing a tech podcast every day. What tech podcasts do you listen to? Well, if you're a business leader, chances are that you've probably had to confront the question of whether you should bring Macs into the enterprise. Because yes, it is a PC world, maybe a Chromebook world in some organisations, but there's no avoiding the fact that some users prefer Mac devices and their platforms. So when I was looking at learning more about how businesses can adopt Mac across their business and its upsides and overcoming challenges and complications, I came across a podcast created by SHI, and it's called We Got Your Mac. Essentially, We Got Your Mac is a podcast that is trying to help business leaders understand the pros and cons of Mac adoption. And the hosts, Victoria Barber and Kevin English, they lead their listeners on a journey from discovery to deployment with thought leaders and specialists from the world of Apple Mac. So they explore questions like, is your employee experience suffering by only offering one platform? Can you drive productivity with a device choice? And do Mac platforms help support innovation? Because adopting Mac at scale isn't purely an IT decision, it's a business decision. So the show doesn't get super technical, but rather it's on a level that everyone can relate to. And as you all know, that's something I try and do with this podcast too. I've listened to the first few episodes and I'm excited for the rest of the season because they've already released episodes on topics such as building the business case, understanding the total cost of ownership, and collaborating in Windows-dominated workplaces. And they have episodes coming out every few weeks. So if this is something that would interest you, I thoroughly recommend it. Why not give it a listen? Subscribe to We Got Your Mac wherever you get your podcasts, or go to wegotyourmac.com, where you can access all the episodes and great bonus resources for business leaders like you. But we've covered so much today, so anything you want to add to the conversation, if you want to join me on the show, please email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, just @NeilC.Hughes. Let's keep this conversation going, but that's it for today. So thank you for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.